Trying to get by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal. Perry in the face, 1-1. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
But yeah, so these morons, apparently somewhere, they found this like 2,500-year-old mummy, and they opened it. Like
in Jack Purvich's apartment?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Jack Purvich's awful apartment house rental, whatever it is actually secretly been inside a 2,500-year sealed away mummy coffin. I need people who like are in science or archaeology to watch movies, because all of the stupid things they do, people have already been talking about. And we have so many movies of why it's like a bad idea to make dinosaurs or like open coffins. Like, anyways.
Watch The Mummy and The Mummy 2.
Right?
And however, I don't know if it's called The Mummy 2. I know there's sequels, but
The Mummy Returns.
That's technically The Mummy 2. And then The Mummy 3, whatever the title is. And then what was the new one with, it wasn't The Mummy, or was it, with Tom Cruise?
It was called The Mummy, but it was with Tom Cruise. And that was supposed to be part of, like, the Universal movie monsters. Like, they were going to bring the whole thing back, dude. I think The Mummy was so bad that they were like, okay, we're not going to do this now.
Yeah, I mean, if you get Tom Cruise, you expect it to be good, and it just did not live up.
One would think.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, usually it does pretty well. They messed up and they didn't get Tom Cruise. They got the deep fake Tom Cruise from TikTok.
There you go.
Wrong guy.
They got his body double from all the Scientology events.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. Well, we're back for the second time. You'll never know that we were gonna do this a couple days ago, but I've spilled the beans now. We had tried to record an episode. But my laptop charger decided to just stop working completely. And we entered the show with 75% battery, and I thought that would be enough. And we got 25 minutes in, and it died. So we...
No, you have to tell them how funny it was, where we log on to the call, and you go, just so you know, we got to kind of not do our normal thing and like really kind of stick to our plan. He's like, my battery charger isn't working right now. I should have enough battery. We're going to be fine. 10 minutes in, you send me a little DM on Twitter. Hey, after we wrap this part up, we got to stop. Just because, or after we do, just like this little part, we got to stop.
Yeah.
And then it was like 2 minutes later. Okay, after we do this little part, we really have to stop. And then like 2 minutes later, the whole thing just died.
It just kept going quicker and quicker. Like it jumped from like 70 to 60% in 5 minutes. I was like, okay, like that's going fast. And then we talked for another 5 minutes. I looked back and it was at 40%. It just kept free falling. And it went downhill from there. And then it cut off before we could even save anything from the last show. So we're back here again, talking the Rangers Metro Division preview. And we have a 10-minute only segment that we're going to talk about some NHL stuff. Last time we recorded this, before the footage was lost, I talked way too long, and the 10-minute segment turned into 15 to 20, as it usually does. So
sounds about right. Mm-hmm. That's the normal kind of math that checks out, 1 to 1.5.
Yeah.
So, but this will be good. This will be fun. And okay, so so that's what we're going to do, because this is the Metropolitan Division preview. And wait a minute, give me 1 second. My brain just completely shut down. The Metropolitan Division preview and the New York Rangers deep dive. So we wanted to stick to that, but a couple of things happened between the last episode and today, I guess now, that we did want to hit. A couple of little things. First things first, I will start the timer, and then I'm going to start talking. Eddy, I am going to mildly editorialize while I say this. You give your take, and we'll move on.
All right. I got it.
All right. Ready, set, and go. Blake Wheeler of the Winnipeg Jets was recently stripped of the captaincy. This has been a move that has been presented as Rick Bowness's decision, as he is the new head coach there. There is a lot of talk kind of just in hockey about what this means. There have been longstanding rumors that the dressing room in Winnipeg was not in a great situation. We all have heard Pierre-Luc Dubois wants out. Apparently Scheifele might want out. We've seen people, player after player after player, walk out the door. They don't really get free agents, notably, and they can't even really get guys to stay. Eddy, is this an issue?
Yeah, I think it's an issue. It doesn't make sense to strip Wheeler of the captaincy this close to the season, but it's just compounded of all the issues in Winnipeg in general. We talked about this with Avery on the Canadian edition, where we kind of talked about all the Canadian teams, about how everything's going wrong in Winnipeg. Dubois wants out, Scheifele wants out, and now stripping Wheeler of the captaincy. Just another in a long list of problems in Winnipeg. So, I mean, it's not surprising, but it's just weird.
Yeah, I think for me, the one little bit I'll add is, like, when this first got announced, I felt like some of the kind of talk around it was a little over dramatic. I was like, nah. And then the more I sat with it and the more I kind of heard, I was like, no, it's definitely kind of a huge problem that they did this, like you said, especially so close to the season. Okay, touching on back to the Central Division. The New York Rangers traded Nils Lundqvist to the Dallas Stars for a conditional first and a conditional fourth. How do we feel?
I think it's a good move for both teams. I don't see where Lundqvist was going to fit into the plans for the Rangers. I know they really liked him, but with Schneider stepping up and Zach Jones stepping up, and then all the other guys that are already there, Fox, Trouba, K'Andre Miller, there wasn't a lot of room for him. And then immediately goes to Dallas. He slots in the top four. Probably plays with Esa Lindell, maybe plays with Heiskanen, a good young defenseman. It wasn't like he was traded because things weren't going well. He was tracking in the right direction. So I think it's a good move for both teams. Rangers get a first-round pick. They'll probably flip for somebody at the deadline.
Yep. All right. The Anaheim Ducks, I believe it was Media Day, Pat Verbeek came out and addressed the kind of elephant that's not in the room and said Anaheim will not be naming a captain this year. The quote that I have written down is, "We're going to let the room sort itself out." Dallas Eakins made a comment at that same kind of media availability about the team has good veterans, but essentially that was the first day that they didn't have Ryan Getzlaf, because once the season ended, they weren't really in that kind of environment. Any chance that maybe they all hung out together is, one, unlikely because everybody lives everywhere, and two, just kind of hard to do. Where are you at on Anaheim not having a captain this year?
I think it's the right move. We talked about this before. It doesn't make sense to me to go right from Ryan Getzlaf and name a captain. I don't think there was a clear front runner. There was guys we thought were near the top of the list, guys like Fowler. We thought Troy Terry might be close to that possibility. Adam Henrique's options. But there was no guy that you said, this has to be the captain. 100% this is the guy that's going to take the C. So, yeah, let it kind of sort itself out, see how the season goes, see who steps up in the dressing room, hand obviously a bunch of four guys the A, let them, for lack of a better term, battle it out, and see where things go at the end of the year. You've got some young guys in Zegras and McTavish. Maybe that goes that way. Maybe you go with Fowler or Henrique on the older side of things. So I'm fine with it. I think it would have been way too premature to name a captain for this year.
Yep, hit it right on the head. There wasn't a clear succession plan, and so as much as there are guys that different people can certainly make a reasonable argument for, seems like it's best to give everybody a year to kind of figure out their place in the new post-Ryan Getzlaf Ducks era. I believe it was last week the middle of the week, we had 3 defensemen retire. We had Keith Yandel step away, PK Subban stepped away, and Zdeno Chara, the oldest and largest man in the world, finally hung his skates up. Where are we at, Eddy?
Yeah, I think for Chara it was coming. Again, like with Yager, he's a guy you felt like that could play forever in this league. But the play was declining over the years, and I'm sure the number of suitors that were willing to go in for him at this point had kind of dwindled to a point where it just made sense for him to retire. I'm sure it's just tough for him to even train at the same level anymore. For a guy his size to stay and be able to play that long and not sustain a career-ending injury, it's really nice to see him go out in his own terms. Same for all the other guys, too. I think Yandel, it was starting to trend that way. He was known as an offensive defenseman throughout his career. That side of his game was starting to go as he aged, so it made sense for him. Subban's maybe a bit surprising, but again, not the same since the back injury. And this is a guy who's going to make more money probably this year in broadcasting than he could have on an NHL contract. So it felt like the right time again for him when you sit back in hindsight to say this was a good time for him to hang up the skates and move on to the next part of his career.
Chara, the only Hall of Famer in the group?
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah, I like Yandel. I like Subban. But I don't think they did enough to get to that next level.
Yeah, I think Yandel goes in as this was the guy who set the Iron Man streak.
Yeah.
I think he'll be in the Hall of Fame, obviously, for that. I think if you told me in 30 years PK Subban went in as a builder for his post-hockey career combined with all of the wonderful work that he did in Montreal, that he did in Nashville, I'm sure he was great in New Jersey. His personality, he was never afraid of a moment. He was really great. But I think, like you said, Chara is the one that really stands out from the three as being a clear Hall of Famer, going to go in on his first ballot, I would imagine.
Yeah.
The NHL has games in Europe. One of those games is going to be in Czechia, in Prague. The Czechia government, I'm still learning how to do this, I apologize if I am anything, but for everybody who's not up to date, the Czech Republic, their government made a comment that they are not going to allow Russian players on those NHL teams to play in the game as a statement or reaction to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Mike Greer, the newly appointed GM of the San Jose Sharks, said about it, either we all go or none of us go. Eddie, where are you at?
Yeah, I think it makes sense for both sides. I can understand why the Chechen government doesn't want Russian players or to be represented in these games in their country. And at the same point, I can see Mike Greer's side of things where, listen, we're not going to segregate our team to go and play these games. That's not good for the locker room. And as much as, yes, there are issues in Russia, it's not directly related in a sense to these players. And it sends a bad message for them for their season to go and say, hey, we're leaving you guys here and we're going to go play these games. So, again, I see both sides of it. It makes sense to just not play the game there and not have it happen. Again, they do this every year with the European games. So I think it just makes sense for both sides to just scrap the game.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see. Maybe something has come out in the meantime, but I haven't heard anything about what any resolution, if any, that there is going to be in that situation. But it's definitely something I'm going to be very interested in. I think for all the criticisms of Gary Bettman, he's certainly someone who can appreciate the big picture in certain instances in international relationships.
Yeah.
The last thing that we will get to, the Edmonton Oilers signed Jake Virtanen to a PTO last week. This after he spent a year in the KHL after being released by the Vancouver Canucks 2 seasons ago, after being accused of sexual assault. He was recently, I believe, within the last 2 months, he was found not guilty on those charges, and he has been brought in on a PTO by Ken Holland.
Yeah, I mean, it's setting a bad precedence for the Oilers now, starting with Evander Kane in that situation. We talked with Avery about this, that you can kind of, in a sense, explain that away with the ability that Evander Kane has to play hockey and why you're willing to take a risk on a player like that. Doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, but you can have that argument about it. You can't have that argument with Jake Virtanen. He's not a good hockey player. Wasn't a good hockey player here. Wasn't a good hockey player over in Russia. It makes no sense. There's a lot of better players available on the free agent market. I think before this happened, Sonny Milano was still a free agent and signed a PTO in Calgary. There's a bunch of other players available that you could bring in and give a shot to. So I don't see the logic here from Edmonton. And again, with it coupled with the Evander Kane situation, is setting a bad precedence for their roster decisions.
Yeah, like you said, there's not even an overly cynical justification here. Final thing, real quick, last 10 seconds. Recently, Pavel Michikov, Sasha Pastujov, Fidston, and Tristan Luneau were the first cuts in Ducks training camp. They have all been sent back to their CHL teams. And we did it, man. Hit it in 10 minutes. I like that. That's fun. We might add that in. That's kind of fun.
The quick comments before we move on from those cuts. I think they're the logical, right? 3 guys go back to the OHL. 2 back to the OHL, 1 to the Q, 1 to the WHL. I believe the only 4 junior eligible players that were kind of obviously going to go back. I believe it's Zellweger and Gauthier who are the last ones there, and they're the closest to making the roster. So, yeah, I mean, this were obvious cuts, if you want to call them that, early on. So I'm fine with it. It'll be fun to see those guys go back and have another year. And outside of the other guys, Zellweger and Gauthier and McTavish, they don't really benefit from going back. These guys will benefit from having another year to go back and dominate. So I think it's a smart move. It's the right move.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think with the rookie camp that he had and with how he apparently looked in the first game, I think you could have made an argument that maybe Tristan Luneau would stick around a little bit longer, or even Minchikov maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think there's no real benefit other than just having him around, and this way they already are going to go into the season and be in a position to get their heads right. Like friend of the program, Josh Bell at Joshua Bell 31 on Twitter said, another year of Pastujov and Zellweger, or Pastujov and Minchikov in the OHL, I will take it.
The interesting one is Noah Warren's still there, is he not?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a bit
he's
interesting.
The one for me that I think there is a very easy answer for why he, of those ones, has stuck around still. They don't have another guy like that.
Yeah.
He's kind of 1 for 1 in the Ducks prospect pool right now.
I just think it's interesting in the sense that his teammate was sent back, and that you can maybe take this as there's a legitimate shot he gets a look, right? Is like, I don't see the point here of keeping him for another preseason game, playing him for 1 preseason game, and sending him back. I think there's a legitimate shot, if he continues to play well, that he could have, a 9-game look.
Yeah, I have to be honest. I think I would be hard-pressed to see him get more than 4 or 5 games.
Yeah.
And again, that's a semantic thing. You're 100% right when you look at it as you have to look at these in 9-game stints. Because, as we know, that 10th game is when you burn a year of your ELC. But I think the thing, like I said, is he's 1 for 1 in the Ducks prospect pool as far as that type of player, that profile, the way you can kind of project him forward. But the other thing is the other guys are all lefties, and this team has a lot of left-handed puck-moving defensemen. I mean, even right, Josh Mahura is still on this team. You know what I mean? And you're going to have Drew Hellison, you're going to have Shattenkirk, you're going to have these guys. So, I think Warren will probably be. I imagine he'll be sent down in the next week or so.
Yeah.
But I would certainly love to see him be on a healthy scratch on opening night. That would be really interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, with Kulikov coming in, it does make it unlikely that he could see a game or two, because now you've got Fowler, Drysdale, Fowler, Klingberg, Kulikov, Drysdale, Shattenkirk, and then Mahura, Zellweger, whoever. But you've got 5 guys there who should play, and then that 6th spot is up for grabs. So Zellweger, I think, has the inside shot of making it, but then you still have Mahura and a few other guys there that could that could take that spot. So as much as I'd love to see it, and I think him staying, there is some sense to it, but it could just be, again, depth for preseason. They want to see a few more games from him, get a few more reps in, because he was injured during the rookie camp, and they want to get a better look at him. So it could just be something like that. But good for him, man. I mean, he's looked good from what I've heard from people who have been at the workouts and at the practices and at the games, that he's looked pretty good.
Yeah, no, I mean, always nice to have young guys surprising. I just think it's one of those things that anytime you can have someone who is just around longer than you were expecting them to be, it's just always a nice sign. It's always encouraging. Like you said, what we heard has been pretty positive regards to most of these prospects right now. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens to the cuts and in what orders guys kind of get sent back to wherever they're going to spend the majority of this year.
All right, well, on to the Rangers then.
Do we want to do the Rangers or the division first?
You know what? We did division first for the last one, didn't we?
Yeah.
Let's go division first. Let's do that.
All right. So I'm going to read to you, Edward, the 21-22 Metro Division standings. Carolina, 54-20-8, 116 points, won the division. The New York Rangers, 52-24-6, 110 points, made the playoffs. Pittsburgh, 46-25-11, 103 points, made the playoffs. Washington, 44-26-12, 100 points, made the playoffs. New York Islanders, 37-35-10, 84 points, missed the playoffs. Columbus Blue Jackets, 37-38-7, 81 points, missed the playoffs. New Jersey Devils, 27-46-9, 63 points, missed the playoffs. Philadelphia Flyers, 25-46-11, 61 points, missed the playoffs. Eddie, of the teams in this division, who do you think, good, bad, or even if it's surprising that they're stuck in neutral, who do you think is going to kind of be a bit of a shock with where they finish this year?
Yeah, so my first one is a team that I think is going to fall from where they did last year. It's Washington. They've got a lot of injuries piling up now. You know, the last time we recorded this, I had mentioned them as well, and I had mentioned Tom Wilson. Apparently, he's on track to come back a little bit sooner. He's, I think, projected to miss 3 months, so maybe it's going to be, around a month and a half, 2 months now. Either way, they start the season without him. They start the season without Nick Backstrom. And they hadn't really done anything in the offseason to address, some significant holes in their lineup. They brought in Dylan Strome. They brought in Marcus Johansson. I believe they added a little bit on defense. But largely, this is still the same team, and the injuries still remain the same. So this is going to be heavy on Kuznetsov and Ovechkin for a good 2 to 3 months to start the season. And then Tom Wilson comes back, and that helps a little bit. But there's still Nick Backstrom could still miss the entire year. There's not a lot clear on how that's going to go. It's one of those injuries that, similar to, I think, Sean Couturier, what he's dealing with right now, where projected that maybe he could come back. A setback happened with his injury. Now looks set to miss most of the year. So I think they could fall pretty far. I don't think they're going to get near 100 points. I think we could be looking at a team that finishes in that 80 to 85 point range in a good year for them this year, which sucks because I want to see Ovi do well. I think Ovi's still going to score goals, and he's going to be the real reason that team is even scratching at maybe getting a wild card spot. But there's no way I could see them being a 100-point team this year. I just don't see guys like Connor McMichael and Hendrix Lapierre stepping up enough to make up for those losses.
Yeah, you're a little low on those guys. I think you're not that they're inherently like bad players, but that you just don't think they have the kind of difference-making upside that another player would have to, again, like you said, make up for the loss of Nicholas Backstrom.
And there's not many guys who can, right? In the way that team operates, special. Right? Like they have always been heavily reliant on Ovi, Backstrom as a top line, and then Kuznetsov being a secondary scorer. Now you take that option out where now it is really just one line, and all that pressure to get secondary scoring is on Lapierre. It's on McMichael. It's on Dylan Strome. It's on Anthony Mantha, who I believe is still there. Mm-hmm. So it's on those guys. Yeah, and listen, they have the talent if everything goes well to make it and get close to what they were last year. Just with the injuries, and I'm not a huge fan of Darcy Kemper there either. I could see this going off the rails fairly quickly and them missing the playoffs.
Yeah, I just, I think you're right. I don't think that the floor is as high for this team. I'm, not a big Darcy Kemper fan. I mean, look, I don't know why it kind of hadn't clicked in my head when we did the first 30 minutes of the show or whatever the last time. But one of the things is, like you were saying, they're heavily reliant on Backstrom and Ovechkin. Like, the Ducks and the Capitals were really the same franchise, for 5, 6, 7 years. The Ducks won theirs early in the career of the two, and then, it took till, I think he was 33, something like that in that area, before Ovechkin finally got his cup. Mm-hmm. but again, it's a team that was borderline dominant in the regular season, played a distinctive style of play, had an incredible steady presence in the locker room, on the ice, dependable guys, and it's just kind of always been about finding guys to support them. I think Nick Backstrom is great. I think not having him is going to be a huge issue. You always want to root for guys. You hope Dylan Strome does well, especially after getting out of Chicago. But I don't know that there's a ton of optimism. I don't think it's insane. Short of, McMichael or LaPierre really popping huge, and I like those guys. I think they can be meaningful players, but I think it's fair to say that short of them being at the very best way ahead of schedule, this is probably an 85-point team, especially with some of the other teams in this division who have taken big steps forward or made meaningful additions.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's the big thing as well, is a lot of teams have gotten better, or teams should perform better than last year. So I think, New Jersey's gotten better, Columbus has gotten better, Philadelphia, despite the injuries that they're suffering right now, with John Tortorella there and the players they have, they should not be the worst team in this division. Pittsburgh's still going to be good. The Rangers and Carolina are in a tier of their own. So, it's going to be tough to win games. There's not going to be any really easy matchups here. Even the Islanders, who I think are potentially the worst team in this division, that's still not going to be an easy game against them. They still have some good players there. So it is one of the tougher divisions in terms of parity. Outside, I think, of Carolina and the Rangers, everybody's kind of in the mix there, right? I don't think we're looking at anybody and saying, they're in Arizona or Chicago in this division. They're a clear bottom. I think everybody has a chance, if things go right for them, to compete for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I think, I think the teams... I think you're right. I think there isn't a definitive tanking team in this division. The Couturier injury information coming out that he's likely to miss the whole season. I think that puts a huge cap on how well they can play just on a nightly basis on this team. I think he's a great player. I think he's a difference maker. I think he means a lot in that locker room. I think he's the type of player who fits a Tortorella style perfectly. He's a hard-nosed, 200-foot guy, and he's kind of Ryan O'Reilly-ish to me in that way. And that, maybe in a perfect world, he's actually your second center, but it is not by any means really a deficit if he's your first-line center. And like you said, Tortorella is coming in, and he's going to have them playing that play for overtime style. He's going to try to keep it low event, and try to play for that overtime point more nights than not. And so, I think you're right. I think there's a shot that the Islanders might end up being the worst team in this division. I think it's probably between the Islanders and Philly. But Columbus doesn't have a first-line center. Right now, it might be Jack Roslovic, who I like, but he's not a first-line center.
Yeah.
And maybe they're going to move Cole Perfetti into that, but I don't know that you want to do that to him right off the bat.
And they're largely the same as last year, other than Johnny Gaudreau.
Minus Bjorkstrand.
Yeah, so minus Bjorkstrand, adding Gaudreau, right? So it's I think adding
Goodbranson, who the deal. I get sorry, but they added Goodbranson, and I do think that's worth something. I do think he's going to bring steadiness, a physical, steady presence at the bottom of the lineup. Right, if he's playing 17, 18 minutes a night, there's a real problem. But if he's only playing 14 a night, then I think he can be a very good, a very capable third pair defender for that team.
Yeah, I think there's a sticker shock in a sense with Johnny Gaudreau being added to that team, that there is expectations of Columbus to be a lot better, and I think they will be. But when you add the additions and losses together, losing Bjorkstrand is huge for them. That's going to be tough to replace. And obviously adding Johnny Gaudreau, for sure he's going to make that team better. Is going to be 115 points there? We'll have to see. I don't know. He's playing on an exceptional line in Calgary where he put up those numbers, so that will be tough. Right. But he is going to play with Line A. I think Ken Johnson is going to do well there. He should challenge for the Calder Trophy, so that will help. And maybe that Ken Johnson having a good year mitigates the loss of Bjorkstrand, so you get kind of the full value of adding Johnny Gaudreau. Goodbranson will help. You need Merzlikins to have a decent year, an average year, a lot better than he did last year. And some of the young defensemen need to step up, and Adam Boqvist needs to have a good year. So Werenski's going to have to lead that blue line and really get things going for them. So they will be better, but I think, again, that addition of Johnny Gaudreau almost makes it feel like they should do more than they probably should be expected of. And I think that's what's hard, because New Jersey, I think, has made a lot better additions, but not many people are talking about them because they didn't add a Johnny Gaudreau. I really like what they did. I think Andre Palat's great. I think John Marino's great. I think Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier down the middle is exceptional. Alexander Holtz should play this year, and he's looked good in preseason. They've got a lot of depth up front and on the blue line now, and then all of a sudden, the question mark is, can Mackenzie Blackwood and Vitek Vanacek do good enough in net? But I would give New Jersey a better chance of finishing higher up in the division than Columbus. But it's that Gaudreau addition that I think gets people really hyped up about Columbus.
Yeah, I think the thing with Gaudreau and Columbus is what he does is he gives them a guy who has the ability to be special in 15, 20, 30-second bursts. And I think more than anything, that's the benefit of elite talent, right? Is it gives you an outsized ability to be special for 20, 30, 40 seconds in a game. I think it's more than fair to say Gaudreau probably doesn't hit 100 points. If he does, then I think Laine probably wins the Rocket Richard. Yeah. I think those two things almost have to go hand in hand. But I do think there's a world in which they have the best power play, or one of the handful of best power plays in the league, spurred by Werenski and Gaudreau and Laine and Jacob Voracek, who had 3 goals last year, but 80 points or something absurd.
Yeah, Ken Johnson could be on there. Adam Boqvist could be on there. So they have
Cole
options.
Perfetti.
Yeah.
They'll have a couple of guys. Jake Bean's a nice player for a second power play maybe.
Yeah, they got depth. They got Nyquist as well, who's there. So I think
Jesper Bratt. Oh no, whoops. You're looking at
New Jersey, yeah.
I'm looking at New Jersey.
But even Roslovich, who you mentioned before, so they have players. They're a good team. They're better than they were last year in a sense. But again, I think, and it's for a good reason. Adding Johnny Gaudreau is not a small thing. You add a star player that makes you a better team, and like you said, you now have a guy who can win you a game in 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are teams, with the losses they had, I think there are teams like New Jersey that added more but don't get enough credit because they didn't add the Johnny Gaudreau, right? They didn't add the superstar player. They built more pieces together to fill out the rest of the roster, where I think they're a better team. But yes, Columbus adding Johnny Gaudreau is the big addition of this entire division. It's the top move of pretty much anybody in the offseason, let alone the Metro.
Yeah, I think
they'll be fun teams to watch. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, to your point, not only did the Devils made moves that raised the floor more than anything, but they did them at the draft. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to just have recency bias. And we love Andre Palat. I know Ducks fans were super excited about the opportunity maybe for Verbeek to bring him to Anaheim to kind of play a veteran presence. But I think he's going to be great for them in New Jersey. He's a really good player. He plays a really hard game. John Cooper said a bunch of times last year, the thing that makes him special is he plays a blue-collar game with white-collar players. He's a guy that can maybe play with Hughes or Hischier and really help insulate them and take their game to the next level. Like you said, John Marino's great. I think you could maybe argue that the only big addition that, from an impact potential, could beat the Gaudreau signing would be the Burns trade. Carolina adding a guy who should, hopefully, they are expecting to be a difference maker from the back end and help generate offense. Because this team has been very good, but they have struggled to score goals once they've gotten into the postseason. I think Rod Brindamore is one of the 5 best coaches in the league, and I have all the faith in the world in him to get the most out of this team. But I think if they're not scoring goals, there's a limit on how far Freddie Anderson can take you. And I just think it's easier, as dumb as it sounds, I do think it's easier to try to find ways to get those extra goals as opposed to trying to make a really good team that much better defensively, because I just don't know how much better they can be.
Yeah, no, I definitely think Brent Burns, it adds something they haven't had to that blue line. I mean, Dougie Hamilton did kind of bring that, but I think what you get with Brent Burns is a kind of a pure focus, and you know what you're going to get from him offensively. Trocheck's a big loss for them, but I think they have the guys in that lineup. I think Kotkaniemi can take a step forward and maybe be that guy this year. They're certainly paying him to be that guy. I know he's not making the 7 he did off the offer sheet, but he's still making 4.8, so he has to be that guy. I think Trocheck's making less than that with New York, so you got to hope that Kotkaniemi is that guy. The real difference maker, I think, for them this year is going to be Seth Jarvis. I think a full season of Seth Jarvis after he posted 40 points in 68 games, he looks like he's going to play with Aho and Teravainen or Aho and Svechnikov, so he's going to have a great opportunity to really contribute there. That's going to be a difference maker in their offense for the forward group, I think, because everything else is largely the same. You're going to have a second line now, I guess, of Kotkaniemi, Netchas, and one of either Teravainen or Svechnikov, whoever's not playing on that top line. So Jarvis will be the difference maker up front, but then, Brent Burns is the real superstar addition. You can still call him that. I mean, he's 37 now. But
Can you?
I don't know. I think to this team he is. I mean, he put up 54 points last year at 36 years old, and that's not something to shy away from as a defenseman. You have to look at that. He played 26 minutes a night. He's going to be the big guy for this, and I think him playing with Jacob Slavin is going to be
that's the thing to me. Yeah. That is really the specialty here is
prime Vlasic and Burns, right?
That's exactly right. You're going to get somebody to help him recreate that dynamic, and I do think he's going to be under a coach in a system that is going to really allow him to maybe try to refine some of that form, maybe get another defenseman. I think Cale Makar hit it last year, but we might get another defenseman to hit 20 goals again this year. That would be fun. Yeah. That would be great. I can't stand Brent Burns, but I'm here for goals.
Don't forget they have Max Pacioretty.
Mm-hmm. He's going to be out for about 6 months. I don't think he's expected to come back until late January, early February. Yep. He's the playoff thing.
Yeah.
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, I did too until I was looking at Cap Friendly and I saw his name on the IR and I remember they have him. That's huge right there. Is if things aren't going, if things don't turn out well for Teravainen or Netchas or God forbid Jarvis isn't paying out, you've got a guy who steps right in without moving anything.
Right, and the other thing is if those guys are able to kind of take a step forward, even if it's not as big a step as you maybe hope, bringing in a guy like Pacioretty and having those guys to really insulate your depth, or not insulate, but invigorate your depth and add a little bit more scoring punch to the second and third lines. Real quick, the thing with Carolina that I wanted to ask you. Does this come down to Kotkaniemi and Svech this year of being the players that have to take a step forward? Because I don't know how much better Sebastian Aho can play. He's been great. Yeah,
I would even argue that I don't know how much better Svechnikov has to get in a sense. He had an exceptional
in the regular season. I think that's fair, but I do think in the playoffs I think he did pretty well this last playoffs. I think he put up 6 or 7 goals maybe in the first 2 rounds, but I do think he is going to need to be a consistent goal scorer for this team if they're going to have a chance to really be the team they want to be.
His regular season numbers are going to have to be close to the same. He's going to be close to a point per game in the playoffs as well as the regular season for them to do well, because Aho has shown he can do it in the regular season and in the playoffs. Teravainen as well he's a key part to this offense. He did good. I think he kind of just one of those consistent guys who does well no matter what. I think Kotkaniemi is really going to have to take a step forward with the loss of Trocheck. And Martin Necas is going to have to get back to what they wanted from him. He was on the trade block this year, presumably, from what we heard from the rumors. And things didn't materialize. They wanted a lot for him. So he's still there. He's still an exceptionally good player. He's young. And he's going to have to get things going for them and really show he can be a quality second-line NHLer. Otherwise, he could be the guy eventually that slides down in the lineup when Pacioretty comes back if he can't prove that he can stick it up there. But, he's shown us on occasion in the season before the last that he can be a really good player in the National Hockey League. He just has to do it again.
Yeah. So, really, other than the Rangers, which we're going to get to, the only team we haven't really hit on is Pittsburgh. I don't know what to do with this team. I think that they're still good. I do think losing Marino is going to hurt. I do think Matheson was good for them. I don't know that they're going to be particularly worried about losing him per se, but I do think there's something to be said for having a guy has been pretty consistent in the 1 or 2 years that he was there. But they did bring in Jeff Petrie. I know you like that. Does the regular season even fucking matter in Pittsburgh other than making the playoffs?
Not really. And you know what? They'll find a way because they always do. The top line of Gensel, Crosby, Rust, is reliable. I think bringing Malkin back and having Raquel to play with Malkin that's going to be good for the both of them. I think bringing Raquel back for what you signed him for and then not being able to sign Malkin would have been a huge detriment to this team because we know Raquel. He needs somebody to play with that is going to, a player like Evgeny Malkin that's going to help create space for him and set up plays. So I think that's big for them. And the rest of their lineup is okay. Jeff Carter, Brock McGinn, Jason Zucker, and all the guys that Pittsburgh randomly finds off the street that end up playing for this team. Like, guys, the amount of undrafted guys that cycle through this team is unbelievable. So they'll find a way. I like Jeff Petrie. I think he kind of gives you, in a sense, what John Marino did. I like John Marino better as a player, but it's not a major drop-off, all things considered. I do like the sneaky addition of Ty Smith. He's not listed on the roster on Cap Friendly, but I think he'll play over somebody like Jan Ruta. Marcus Pettersson's still pretty good. And then Dumoulin and Letang, you know what you're going to get from them. So they're just one of those teams that they're consistently in the mix. I don't think they'll be in the top tier with the Rangers and the Hurricanes, but if I had to pick any other team from this division other than those two to bet money on to make the playoffs, it would be Pittsburgh because they just find a way. They got a great coach. They've got one of the best players and leaders in hockey. They'll find a way. And they have the track record, right, of pretty much making it every year, so I think they'll be fine.
All right, so I'm going to give you a softball, not a softball, but a much simpler question than the one I'm going to follow it up with, and then we're going to get into the Rangers. Okay. Do you think Ethan Bear gets traded this season?
Yeah, I could see it. I think he makes the starting roster and he plays a lot of games for the Hurricanes. But I don't think those trade rumors are going to go away. And I think the Hurricanes have enough depth that if things aren't going well, if he's not playing well, if they get the right offer, I think they're open to it.
Yeah, I agree. I do expect him to move this year. I think especially with bringing in Burns, and already they brought in
Dylan Coughlin too, who played really good today in preseason. They get 3 assists, so he's looking good. So I think they'll have enough guys to make that trade possible if the right deal comes along.
All right, now comes the shitty question, and then we'll get to the Rangers. Eddy, does Matt Barzal get traded this year?
Oh, that's a tough one. I can't see a world where it makes sense for them to move on from Matt Barzal. He's only 25, but he's a pending RFA. It's a trick. They could be put into a situation similar to Matthew Tkachuk, where things aren't just working well, and he wants to change the scenery because, like you said, they could be the worst team in this division. They don't have any young guys stepping into the lineup that are going to make a difference. They were trying to get Goodrow, it didn't happen, and they're just not really a great team on paper. So I think if things go really, really bad this year, there's going to be a conversation at the deadline. And they don't have to make that move at the deadline. We saw that with Tkachuk, but there will be a conversation, I think, where we'll see his name pop up if they're near the bottom of this division as a guy who's picking up trade interest and that the Islanders are listening. So I think he ultimately is on the Islanders at the end of the season. But when we get into the draft and free agency, that's a whole other question.
I think I would feel more. Let me say it this way. I think him getting traded would be a bit more realistic to me if Lamoriello wasn't the GM. I don't see Lou trading the best player on the team.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 700 years old. Like, he's really, he's in that Berkey spot now where he's pretty much just in it for chips. And we know that he's stubborn. We know that, he has no problem making tough calls or taking a hard line with players, with coaches, with whatever it is. I mean, shit, he fired Barry Trotz and refused to explain himself. Now, through, guys like Frege and LeBron and what do you call it? I can't think of his name. Saravalli and stuff. Some of it's kind of come out that it seems like part of that was they were afraid of losing Lane Lambert, who they did make the new head coach. But still, I mean, we saw teams embarrass themselves this summer trying to get Barry Trotz in the door. So I don't think you can obviously say it's not a serious thing that Lamoriello was willing to walk away from, I think who a lot of people might say is the best coach in hockey right now.
Yeah. I mean, if I see him go, played his junior hockey in Seattle, I could see an interesting fit there. I don't think this is a trade that ends up happening. But if you were either team, who says no to a Shane Wright for Matt Barzal type situation? Obviously, other things included, but
fuck, man,
he's not from Seattle, but he played 4 years with the Thunderbirds.
With the Thunderbirds. Yeah. You could talk me into Seattle saying no because I really like the pipe dream of 12 years of Wright and Beniers playing together, or being the two main forwards on that team plus whoever else they're able to build and bring along. That being said, they did just pay Burakovsky. They are paying Grubauer. What's his name? Larson's making a bit of Adam Larson's making some money. Yanni Gourde is making some money. There is something to be said that having a legitimate top line difference making player like Matt Barzal, who is only 25, who you should be able to afford to keep, makes more sense. And then you're like, okay, now we hope Beniers is able to really step in and fill that, high end second line center role.
Yep.
And we've already got the guy in front of him to take care of it instead of hoping two of these guys plan out. So that's a good one. I was actually going to ask you, is there anywhere you think he can go? And that's a great one.
Yeah, and I think a realistic trade, Lou will look at what Calgary did with Tkachuk. Because I think you're right. I can't see him trading him and rebuilding. It just doesn't feel like a Lou move with all the other guys that they have there, the money that they're paying guys like Anders Lee. So there could be a situation where if Barzal is moved, it's for a like for like, in almost a hockey trade in a sense, right? Where Tkachuk was moved for Huberdeau, that type of thing. Not at the same level because Barzal's not at that level, but a similar thing. Like maybe things go bad for Pettersson in Vancouver and it's a swap or something like that. Again, I'm making arbitrary connections here with Barzal being from British Columbia, but.
You know who the other one actually I think would also almost be a better one other than Pettersson is Horvat.
Yeah.
Apparently those conversations are not getting anywhere right now on that extension. And, if you have to trade a Bo Horvat, you can do a lot worse than getting the Matt Barzal back. And in terms of both teams, you're still basically in the same position with we still have to sign this guy this summer. So that seems like one of those trades where it's positive and negative for both sides almost equally.
Yeah, that's probably the likely situation I see if Barzal's moved. It's for somebody to come in and for the Islanders to still be competitive, even though they're probably not going to be. But it'd be a situation where they're bad this year. Lou thinks, okay, we can get a Bedard and move out Barzal, bring in Horvat and run with that or something, right? Yeah. So I could see that being something that ends up happening. Yeah, it'll be an interesting call. It all depends really on Barzal if he wants to stay with the Islanders or not.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, you have to imagine that Islanders ownership is going to insist that everything be done to keep this guy for as long as possible.
They just lost
because
John Tavares.
You can't have him and Tavares walk.
I bet you there's a picture of Barzal with Vancouver Canucks pajamas out there somewhere. So.
Yeah, and one of the ships from the Force Awakens in the background. So, all right, well, I guess we can get to the meat of it. Let me ask you this, Edward. What is your main takeaway from last season in New York for the Rangers that you think is incredibly relevant to the season to come?
I think they finally proved themselves as contenders, not in just the regular season, but built well into the playoffs and how far they went. We've said, for a while since their rebuild was announced, and then they won the few draft lotteries. They got Panarin. They brought in a bunch of these guys. Adam Fox kind of ascended to superstar status. That, all right, you have the pieces, you've got to prove it. And I think they took that step forward there and really showed, okay, like this is a team that could dethrone, the Lightning as the top team in the Eastern Conference. I think that's what they showed last year. And not only that, they've got these young players in Lafreniere and Kakko that you're waiting for to pop off, so that they could get even better this year when one of these guys breaks out inevitably, being former first and second overall picks. So I think they really showed what they're about and what they can be. And then obviously, man, like Igor Shesterkin is just from another planet. I didn't think anybody would ever get close to Vasilevsky this soon, and he's come in and lived up to all the hype that he had coming over from Russia. I don't know what they do with these Russian goalies, but these guys are a different breed with Vasilevsky and Shesterkin. And Sorokin was great last year, and you've still got who's the guy that the Predators drafted? I can't remember his name now. Askarov. You still got him coming over, and if the track record checks, then he's going to come over and do just as well as these guys. So.
Yeah, according to Brian Baston, who writes about them for on the Forecheck, the SB Nation blog, and covers the team, like he said Askarov has looked really confident, he's looked really comfortable, and he's looked really strong. So you're 100% right. There seems to be this pretty, and you can take it back to Varlamov, and there seems to be a pretty steady presence of high-end Russian goaltenders over the last 20, 30 years, like 20 years, I guess. So, yeah, I think for me, and I hate to be this guy, but like I am trying to figure out what happens with Chris Kreider.
Yeah.
He's not going to score 52 goals again. He'd never hit 30 before last year. I don't know what happens. If he takes a step back and Lafreniere and Kakko and Chittle can't take a step forward, I don't know what this team is. They have a star at every level. I love Adam Fox. I love Artemi Panarin. Obviously, Igor Shesterkin is special. But as much as I think Zibanejad Trocheck is a good 1-2, they don't have a ton of special offensive players if those two young guys can't take a step forward. And I think for me, that's kind of the big question moving forward is what can they get out of those guys, if anything? Because to me, that's what's going to put a cap on their season. Because I just don't think, do you feel comfortable saying Chris Kreider hits 30 next year?
Yeah, I think he's going to play without a Zibanejad or Panarin. Right now they're split up, but whether they get put together or not, he'll play with one of those guys. Based off the season he had last year, he will. So I think he could hit 30. I think he's talented enough to hit 30. I think this team is good enough now for him to be a 30-goal scorer. But yeah, I agree that there's no chance, or I'm not going to say there's no chance, but there's a slim chance in my mind that he hits 52 again or 50-plus this upcoming season. And I like the addition of Trocheck, but it's not really an addition as so much it's a replacement for Ryan Strome. You're going to get kind of the same offensive output that Strome did in Trocheck. So, yeah, I mean, it does come down to if Kreider has a decrease in his goal scoring from 50 to 30, who's making up for that? And that all falls on the young guys. Kravtsov, Lafreniere, Hedl, Kakko. That's where it's got to come from, is those guys.
Yeah, it's weird because I think this team has a lot of, like, I love Keandre Miller. I like Jacob Trouba. There are parts of this team, you can do worse for an overpaid third liner than Barclay Goodrow, right? Yeah. He's not a bad player. And it's so weird because they have the guys, right? Where you're like, there's no question about which guys are going to be the guys to take that leap forward if they do it, right? Like, it's not like there's like 6 guys who are like B-level prospects.
Yeah.
There's like 2 or 3 very clear A-level prospects, depending on how you still feel about Kakko, who they're the guys. Like, if this is going to work, it's going to be with them. And it's just about whether or not they can make it happen. And I'm really curious to see. I think Gallant is a good coach, and I think him having a for real goaltender in Shesterkin is going to be incredibly helpful. Because I don't think he ever had Lehner, right? Lehner was only there under DeBoer.
Yeah.
So, as well as Flower played, and as much as, he's somebody it's very easy to root for, you want to see do well, Shesterkin's a better goalie than Flower. And I think it is more than fair to say that even taking into account Flower winning a Vezina, winning multiple Stanley Cups, like, Shesterkin's a better goalie than Flower ever was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if there is a silver lining here for Gerard Gallant and him not to kind of wear out his welcome kind of as he did in Vegas and Florida, it's that he has a very legit goaltender. Do you think Shesterkin can repeat as the Vezina?
Yeah, I think he's got a better chance of anybody in this league. I think the 2 front runners and guys you basically know if you're betting, you want to make a bet right now, and the betting favorites to be in that conversation are Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, and then it's wide open for whoever else has a good year, right? Guys like Saros or Freddie, or anybody else really who has a good year will fall into that mix, but Shesterkin and Vasilevsky are really the only 2 guys in this league that you can say are consistently going to be good and have the track record to prove that. I know Vasilevsky's been around for a little bit longer, so you'd give maybe a little bit more, leeway to him to have a good year, especially the way he bounced back after the start he had. But yeah, I think Shesterkin can be the same as he was last year, which is insane to say considering he finished the year with like a .935 save percentage.
So because we had the technical difficulties, I don't know if you went and saw the doc, but I had been holding to ask you a couple of questions about it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it,
So he finished how many wins do you think Shesterkin had? Just off the top of your head, guess.
I know he's out for a bit, so 38?
36. He went 36, 13, and 4. His save percentage was 934, like you said. Do you want to take a guess at what his goals saved above average was?
God. It's got to be double digits. I'm trying to remember Gibson's in the year that he was unbelievable. It was around 12, I think. It's got 14 or 15?
No, sir.
Higher?
42.46.
Jesus.
Goals saved above average, 42.46 goals. What do you think his goals saved above expected was, knowing that his above average was 42.5?
That's going to be close. 30 in the 30s?
Mm-hmm.
30.
37.2.
Jeez.
Dude, like,
that's unbelievable.
it is insane to me that he put up that good of a season. And like you said, he is not the guy you're worried about regressing.
Yeah.
Like, if he regresses, it'll be bounces. It'll be the team in front of him. One of the things that I thought was kind of ridiculous is they overperformed their expected goals per 60 numbers, and they were not a very good team. Like, their expected goals for percentage was 47.65 as a team. They were under 50. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, for the talent that they had, or that they do have.
They overperformed. They overscored. They got goals for per 60 was 2.35. Their expected goals for per 60 was 2.26. Goals against was 2.2. Expected goals against was 2.5. A third of a goal better defensively than expected based on the quality of shot. There are a lot of good players on this team.
Yeah.
There are a lot of reasons that this could be a first-round exit team, right? That could get in, get home field, like get home ice, and like if they lost to Tampa Bay, would it surprise you?
No.
If they lost to, like, what if Toronto is a wild card team?
Yeah, I could
right?
I could see it, right? Like they're good, but there are deficiencies where they're not at that level, and not many teams can be in the NHL where you're like they can beat anybody, and I would bet money that they beat anybody, and I'd be confident with them beating anybody. There are enough teams with talent that I could say would give them a run for their money, and if things go bad, I could see them losing. So Toronto's one, Tampa Bay's another. I think a healthy Boston could be one. Florida, they're still built pretty well, right? Carolina. So I think there are teams that you could still say are in that category of being just as good as the Rangers.
Like, again, like this is the thing that's so weird to me, because I want to ask you, like, do they have to be all in right now? But like, based on some of the contracts that are on the books, they almost have to be. Like, I almost don't think they have a choice, right? Kreider's making money, Trouba's making money, and those young guys are going to need extensions sooner than later. And
yeah, that's the big thing. Is it's not even that their contracts are up a couple of years from now. Like almost all these guys except Kakko have a extension due next year. So Hedl is Hedel's a pending RFA. Ryan Reeves is a pending UFA. Alexis Lafreniere is a pending RFA. Zach Jones is a pending RFA. Keandre Miller is a pending RFA. Hayek is a pending RFA. And then 2 years from now, Schneider and Kakko are pending RFA. So all these guys are going to have to get contracts. This is a team right now that doesn't have any significant money coming off the books next year. They have $1 million in cap space, and they have to sign some significant players. So what if Lafreniere pops off this year and goes for 60, 70 points? How do you pay this guy? Where does the money come from at this point? Like, this is, when you look at teams that are built to win now, we talk about all the time, you got to win when your young guys are on ELCs. If you really want a good chance of winning, that's when you can build your best
or
team.
on a bridge deal or something.
Yeah. This is the time to do it, because you got to re-sign all these guys at the end of the year. And for them to win this year, they need Alexis Lafreniere, they need Hedl, they need Kakko, they need Schneider, all these guys to step up, Keandre Miller. They all need to play well. They all need to take a step forward. That's the only way they're going to win. And if they do that, well, guess what? You got to pay these guys next year because they had great years. So this is as win now as it gets, with the cap situation they have, the money they have locked up for long term for most of their core players, and the pending contracts that they're going to have to sign at the end of this year. This is a team. I'm sure that's drilled in. Like they got to win this year, because this group won't be together the same way next year.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, I'm looking at our little cheat sheet that we have, and one of the things that's interesting is, like, Chris Kreider actually led the team in expected GAR, which is like not nothing, right? Because again, as much as it is more than fair to say for a guy who never hit 30 goals before, the fact that he hit 52 is clearly unsustainable. If, you know, if those expected goals numbers aren't misleading in some way based on, you know, shot generation and kind of the ways in which he was generating those opportunities, then, you know, maybe he drops to 35-ish goals. But if the team around him improves, you know, again, this is a team that had under 50% expected goals percentage. Like, it's so weird because there is a version of this team that is the next big step forward and is one of the next real big teams to be afraid of in the East. There's also a version of this team that's like pretty good, like really good in the regular season, but not much more than that.
Yeah.
Like the difference between them and the Florida Panthers right now is one of those teams went to the Eastern Conference Final. Mm-hmm. But in a lot of ways, I don't think they're entirely different as far as they have clear talent and they also clearly haven't actually proved themselves.
Yeah.
To whatever extent you want to feel about that, right? Because, again, Kreider scored 50 goals. The young guys haven't taken a step forward. So those two things could certainly meet in the middle. And if that's the case, then I think they're definitely ahead of Florida in the East. But I don't know that that's something you can obviously take for granted.
No, and I do think there is no favorite front runner. I think there's a mix of teams. I think Carolina, I think the Rangers, I think Florida, I think Tampa, and I think you could potentially even push Toronto into that mix of all teams that have the potential to be the best team in this division, but they all have some deficiencies in some areas. And
in the division or in the conference?
In the conference. And they've got some deficiencies in some areas and some ifs that, okay, if this happens, they could have a really good year, but there's, again, with the Rangers stuff, with the young guys stepping up, Toronto, it's the goaltending. In Florida, it's, how do the new guys come in? How do you cope with the loss of Huberdeau? What's going to happen with Bobrovsky and Knight, and so on. With every team, there's always some deficiencies here if things are going to go well. There is no, is Tampa still, they're still as good as they always have been, but they're not at that level where they were for a few years where you're like, okay, they're the clear best team in this division and nobody's even close. They've fallen off a bit because you have to sign certain players. There's turnover in the team, and they've gotten to a point where I think they are still definitely in the mix of one of the best teams, but they're not the clear favorite. I don't think anybody is, but the Rangers are definitely in that mix as one of those teams that could, and it just if these things go right for them or not.
Do you think Brendan Othman makes the team out of camp? Or do you think he's another year in juniors?
I think he's another year in juniors. From what I've heard, I think he's looked pretty good. I struggle.
Because he played pretty well last year in juniors, right?
Yes.
Like, he was one of the better forwards in the whole CHL.
He's in that weird leeway territory where you say, okay, you can send him back and he's not going to really do much better. He can't really do much better than he did the last year. But you don't know if he's 100% ready yet. He reminds me of, a Pettersson or a Kent Johnson and a really kind of tall, lanky kid. So I don't see a clear path for him in this lineup yet. I think there are a lot of guys already in the roster that are going to have lockdown positions, a lot of young players who are going to play. They have some depth in the AHL. They brought in guys like Jimmy Vesey. That would be kind of first call-up. So maybe he gets a game or two or, in that 9-game trial, but ultimately I think he ends up getting sent back unless he plays his way onto the roster. But as good as he's looked, I think another year in junior is probably what ends up for Brendan Othman.
Yeah, I also wonder if just kicking, that ELC another year down the road with all these kids who are going to be needing extensions, I wonder if it's not even worth taking the risk, right? Keep him around for as long as you can in camp and preseason, and then just get his ass back down to juniors, let him run wild, and hope that, the way that this year ends, you feel excited about bringing him up as opposed to feeling like, oh, God, we really got to get this guy in the door.
I think that's probably the case, and with him not being an RFA right now, if you don't touch that contract until 2025, that's probably the best case scenario for them, because you face a world where maybe you have to move on from a Capo Caco, or you have to move on from a Hedel, and having Brendan Othman kind of in place to be on an ELC and kind of make up for that, I think is very beneficial. That extra year is extremely important for them because this window will close fairly quickly, right? With Trouba being 28, Panarin is 30, Kreider's 31, Zibanejad's 29, Trocheck's 29. So you've got 4 or 5 years. So having Othman with that extra year of ELC, I think, is extremely valuable to them. And it's not a shock if you send him back to the OHL, right? So I think that's ultimately the play and probably the best play for both him and for both the team and probably for the player as well. Yeah,
definitely. Real quick, just it's kind of something that we're kind of talking around in a weird way. Again, this is a weird team because they do have guys on big contracts. They also have, by Pronman's ranking, the 9th best prospect pool. There are a lot of guys in this right? You still have Braden Schneider he has so much more room to improve. Yeah. You've got Kakko, you've got Lafreniere, you've got Othman, you've still got Keandre Miller, who is turning into an incredibly nice defenseman. He's a good skater, he's got good size, like he uses his stick incredibly well, kind of cutting guys off. And I'm going to ask you, I guess, similar to how we did it with Dallas, do you think this is a team that needs to start looking to leverage their prospect pool into bringing in difference makers, whether that is by trading some of them or trading picks because they have the confidence that they have the guys already in-house to replace, I don't know, basically, they have a prospect pool which should be strong enough to be willing to move on from some of their early round picks. Yeah. Do you think they're in a position to where they should do that, or do you think they should sit and try to hold off as long as possible?
I think they're in a position where they should start moving picks over prospects because the fact that those guys are closer to your roster in the window is likely only 4 to 5 years that you want to get them in and kind of cycle through these guys as much as you can and keep the roster fresh. But again, they did make a move in a sense of moving Lundqvist out and bringing in that first-round pick from the Stars. So they got an extra first-round pick this year to work with, their own and now Dallas's. So that gives you some leverage to make potentially 2 roster-defining moves at the deadline or before the deadline to bring in some additions here. The only problem that they're going to run into is the cap space that they have. It's going to make it tough just to do deals with picks. They're going to have to get creative, only having about $1 million now and apparently around $4 million at the deadline. That's not a ton to work with to bring in some difference makers, but that could be where you see if Kakko, things are going well with Kakko, that he gets moved up and that gets moved out, and that frees out about $2 million. There's not a lot of leverage for them to move a ton of guys off this roster, but I definitely think they're in that territory, to answer the question, to kind of start moving on from some picks. Prospects, I wouldn't touch your top-end prospects at this point. I think you need those guys in the pipeline that are 1 or 2 years away from making the team.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think, for me, I think I would really start... I would make a list of guys around the league that I'm curious of. If Dallas flails, I'm calling on Pavelski. He's exactly the guy to me, right? That if he holds up, right? And again, I don't think anybody expects him to hit 81 points like he did last year, career high. But if he's still clearly a guy who's able to be effective at both ends and create offense for others, and that's a guy that you give up Kakko for, in my opinion.
Yeah, you could see him in a Rangers jersey too, can't
you? Mm-hmm. This season is going to end up with me having to fucking like the Rangers so much, and I'm going to be so annoyed about it. But that was kind of what I wanted to ask you. What quality of player do you need to move on from a Lafreniere or a Kakko? Or, even... I have a hard time thinking they're going to do it, but maybe you could get, a player like Othman or maybe Keandre Miller out of there. It would take something, it would take a lot, but what is the quality of player at which point you're not hanging up for like Lafreniere?
Yeah, I think Lafreniere has a little bit more leeway in the sense that if he's doing bad, he's a pending RFA at the end of this year. He's on an entry level. You can work a bridge deal in there, a Troy Terry type deal or something like that, where he's making like 1.5 for a few years. That you can see how you can bring him back and give him a bit more time to get things going. With Kakko, the thing is, because he's already making 2.1 right now, he becomes one of the easier players to move out if things aren't going well and get some cap relief, because like you're not moving the big four and Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, Trocheck. You're likely not going to be able to move out Goodrow with the modified no trade clause in 5 years at almost $4 million, and he's probably a guy you want to keep around. So it really does come down to, in the forward group, Hedl or Kakko on who you want to move from. And Kakko's got a couple of years left, where Hedl is a pending RFA at the end of this year. So again, similar situation to Lafreniere with him. If things aren't going well, you can just negotiate a lesser deal next year and work that into your cap structure. So I think Kakko is the one that you're willing to listen to calls on, because if things are going bad with him, then you can maybe convince yourself saying, okay, like, listen, this isn't working out. He's the easiest guy we can move out the door. It does give us some cap relief, and we can get a really good player. Like, you can make Pavelski work at that point, right? Where if it's Pavelski at 50% retained, that's only about $3.5 million. You add in Kakko relief of 2.1, like this, then he's only cost you just over $1 million to bring in a guy like that who's going to impact your roster now. And with you being as win now as the Rangers are going to be this year, those are the types of moves that I think make sense to move out a guy like Kakko. Because the hope is Kakko becomes a 50 to 60 point player this year, and he's only making 2.1, so you don't really have to go out and make that move. But if he's not, then you need to move him out for somebody that can do that for you now, because they need to win now. They have to, with the players that they have and the contracts they have upcoming and everything we've already mentioned here. So I think he's the easiest one to move. I think all the other guys, like Hedl, maybe second on this list. I think Lafreniere is going to be very hard. I think Keandre Miller is going to be even more difficult because they don't have a ton of depth on the left side of defense. It's Trouba, Fox on the right, and
I was going to say, I was going to ask, I almost wonder if it's easier to get Schneider out of there than Keandre Miller.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Rangers, Schneider's tough just because he has 2 years left of ELC. So that's really enticing for them to have him at next year at $925K. But I think, a Zach Jones you could get out of there. And then I think, that's when maybe you start looking at Brendan Othman. But that is, again, a tough call because of the flexibility you have with him. So you dip down below Brendan Othman being kind of your top prospect out of the NHL. And maybe you can get, a Will Cooley, or you can get an Adam Sikora who they drafted, or Vitaly Kravtsov or something like that. Where you can kind of go out and grab one of those guys who's not the top prospect, but one of the better prospects they have in their system. But if we're talking high end players, Kakko is probably the guy, and it really only happens if he's not having a good year.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, it really is a break glass in case of emergency thing with moving on from some of those guys. But Kevin LeBlanc, Timo Meier. Like, I wonder if those are guys that, they could go out and kind of bring in. Yeah. I think LeBlanc's a little bit harder because, his cap hit is lower, but he's got another year. I think you could very easily get one or two teams to retain on Timo Meier and drop his $6 million to closer to 2.5 or something like that.
Yeah, and if you're the Sharks too, like, what type of player do you want to get in return for Timo Meier? I think Kakko would be a type of player that you'd be looking to get back.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
You could get Kakko and the Stars' first round pick and maybe, another prospect here, that's where you start to say, okay, like, this makes sense for us to move on from a guy like Timo Meier. And then again, the fact that Kakko has 2.1, you talked about all the relief you can kind of free up to bring Meier's contract down. It gets very close to being a wash salary-wise, which is a deal for a team as tight against the cap like the Rangers are. It's a deal you kind of dream of that you can make happen at the deadline, where you can bring this guy in who makes a considerable amount of money, but for this last year of his contract, it's not going to affect you at all. And he'd be a guy that would work exceptionally well there. They need wingers. I think if they're going to add anybody at the deadline, it's going to be wingers, because you've got Zibanejad and Trocheck as your definitive 1-2 centers. It's just that question really on the right side, because you've got Kreider and Panarin on the left. Who's going to step up and play there? So if Lafreniere doesn't do it, if Kakko can't do it, if Kravtsov can't do it, that's where you go out and I think you look at, a Pavelski who could play there or Meyer who could play there, and really start looking at the top end guys who could be available at the deadline.
Yeah, man, like Pierre-Luc Dubois would be interesting.
Yeah.
Man, those no moves fucking kill them, because there are interesting players that they could really make. Like Mark Scheifele would be a real nice get for them. And
there'll be a place where there always are a place where people want to play, but when there'll be an attractive place to go at the deadline for sure.
I would just real quick like to say that I am sorry for once again saying Cole Perfetti played in Columbus. I get him and Cole Sillinger.
Yeah, did you just?
I'm looking at Winnipeg's right now, and it says Cole Perfetti, and I was like,
I didn't mention it. I knew what you meant, so I was like, I'm just gonna leave this one.
I appreciate you letting me slide on that. No, I feel like an idiot right now. But no, it's such a weird situation. They have all these really good, movable, valuable assets and no fucking flexibility. This summer they're going to have $18 million in cap space, but like you said, they've got the guys already in the system to retain, right? That they need to re-sign. So maybe if you move on from some of those guys this summer, it's a different situation. Yeah. But until then, I don't know how much really opportunity they're going to have in front of them to make this team meaningfully better over the course of the year. Igor Shesterkin isn't even making $6 million a year.
Yeah.
You have to make the most of that. That to me is your rookie contract quarterback, right? Is we have a legit top 3 goalie in this league making less than $6 million right now. We have to make this work. Yeah. And I don't know what they're supposed to do.
I don't. They're gonna have to get creative. I think they will do well, and I think they'll be able to figure it out. I think Capo Caco potentially is not a Ranger after the deadline. I think they're going to potentially get desperate to make some moves if the young guys aren't panning out to add to this team. They're going to have to. Again, we talk about this with a lot of teams, but I think of most teams this year, when you look at the situation the Rangers, and for all the reasons we've already mentioned, contracts, guys who have to sign, Igor Shesterkin making way less than he deserves right now, they have to win, and they're going to be desperate, and that's going to come with big moves at the deadline and guys, young players that get dealt out the door to bring in some guys who can impact your roster now. And there'll be a fun team to watch, man. I kind of picked the Rangers as a dark horse to win the Cup last year. It didn't pan out. I would put them in that mix again this year because I really like the mix of players they have. They've got, as you mentioned, a superstar at each position. And having Panarin, Fox, Shesterkin, that's one kind of recipe to success, if you want to call it. When you look at the teams that have won, you look at the Lightning. You want the Avalanche, maybe not the best example of Kemper not being a superstar level goaltender, but he played to that level. He played as an elite goaltender in that system with that team. But McKinnon, Makar,
he played really well.
Yeah.
Right, but that's the thing you say, right? Even with them, the reason that they were able to get by with a mid-tier starter is they have multiple superstars at every position, right? Devin Taves is really fucking good.
Yep.
Cale Makar is incredible. Nathan McKinnon, Rantanen. Last year they had Burakovsky. They had guys that really made this team better made that team better. And so, like you're saying, for the Rangers, it's much easier to be these are the 1, 2, 3 guys. And their depth isn't bad. It's just the lack of flexibility if things get weird. Short of an LTIR contract, right? Somebody goes down for the year, which you never want. But short of that, I just don't see where they get their flexibility from unless they can talk. I don't know. Who would you try? You can't. None of these guys are movable.
There's just not movable assets.
Other than, Goodrow has a 15-team no-trade list. So, you've got 16 teams still. But
It's just not enough relief in a sense to.
What do you do? Yeah, it's $3.5 million. Like, it's not nothing, but it's not. Maybe if it's Gaudreau and Kakko and Reeves, now you're getting around $7-ish million.
I think
like,
what you
maybe.
I think what you maybe hope is like Keandre Miller takes another step forward and Zach Jones has a really good year, and then maybe you can move on from Ryan Lindgren. That's 3. We talked about Kakko or Hedl as potential options to move out the door to bring in an impact 4. So right there, like, you can try and free up around 5, and almost you're freeing up that 5 to just bring in other players immediately in that trade to fill that cap space that just are going to be better players, right? And that you add a Pavelski up front, you add a top 4 left shot defenseman on the back end, and that's your additions, right? And I think that's all they need. Is you need a legitimate top 6 winger to come in and play if Lafreniere and Hedl and Kakko don't step up, and you potentially need another left-handed defenseman to come into the mix, or even another forward if you want to go that route. But I think they need 2 serious additions with at least one of these rookies. I think for them, preferably Lafreniere, taking a step into getting closer to a top 6 forward on a consistent basis.
Yeah, it's such a weird situation. Like, I don't. Again, like, I'm repeating myself, and I hate when I do that. But like, this feels like either this works or Gerard Gallant is out, because that's the best option that they have is trying to get a new coach, and like. I don't know. Maybe they can go get Claude Julien, right? Maybe they fire Gallant in December if things get weird, and they bring in a guy like Claude Julien who's got a track record. But I'm looking at this team, and it is so remarkable how strong certain parts of this roster are. How they have guys in position. I mean, shit. Adam Fox is 24 years old. Yep. Shesterkin is 26 years old. He'll be 27 at the end of December. Like, Keandre Miller, Braden Schneider, Jacob Trouba, Chris Kreider, who, again, I give a lot of shit. He's a solid dude. He's a solid player.
He's a player you want.
That contract sucks. I don't think he's a $6.5 million player, but he's a good player who you like having in the organization.
Like the last piece of the old Rangers that you have left, right? Like, he's the guy that's been around.
It's him and Zibanejad are the only old guys, classic guys around. McDonough's gone, Girardi's gone, fucking, like, everybody's gone. So, maybe that is the thing for them, is if they get off to even a slow start over the first 5-6 weeks, maybe Gallant's gone. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Chris Drury playing that card that quick. But you only have so many options, and this is a team that you should expect to win games right now.
I think if you get 20, 30 games in and things are looking real bad, that's the call you have to make at that point. There's nothing else you can do, and they're in such a win-now mode for this season specifically, and the window is relatively short, in 3 to 4 years, really until the end of Shesterkin's contract, so this year, next year, and the year after. That you don't have a lot of mulligans to make up for it. You can't say, oh, this season's a write-off, we've got next year. You don't have that luxury with the way this team is built right now. So I don't see that happening. I think they're good enough to be a team that starts off hot, and obviously just having a goaltender like Shesterkin's going to make the difference. But yeah, it will get into a sticky situation if all of a sudden they're not looking too hot after 20 games.
Okay, well, after looking like it was going to be a blowout, it's now 4-3, and Josh Lapina scored a goal. Love Josh Lapina. Mostly because his last name means wolf, and it's funny. Anyways, is there a heart winner on this roster to you?
Shesterkin?
Over Panarin?
Yeah, I mean,
Panarin
I don't
think that's
should
unfair.
have won one already, but for a couple seasons ago. But Yeah, I would say Shesterkin is probably number one. Panarin maybe right behind that, and then a slight nod to Fox as being a potential Hart winner, but that'll be tough for him to do it.
If Yossi didn't get it even get in the close last year, there's no way.
I think there's maybe one defenseman who has the potential to win it, and that's Cale Makar. Outside of that, it's very, very tough to get in that conversation as defenseman. But, Adam Fox has the talent to do it. He would just need an exceptional year. You're talking like 90 points from a defenseman or something around that range. And just really dragging this team to probably the top of the Eastern Conference to be in that discussion. So, and again, the real knock against guys like that is, if he's doing that well and they're top of the Eastern Conference, well, then Shesterkin's playing well and Panarin's playing well, and then you kind of nail yourself out of that conversation because everybody else is playing well on that team. He doesn't win it if they don't make the playoffs, and he doesn't win it if they're not playing well. So, and he doesn't win it if they are playing well because you've got them as help in that equation, which usually turns the voters off from picking a guy like that. So damned if you did, damned if you don't situation for Adam Fox. But yeah, Shesterkin's just probably the guy that I think is the most likely to. But again, a goaltender winning the Hart is just as rare.
Is there a world in which this team doesn't make the playoffs?
I don't see it.
I don't either. That's what I'm like. I was trying to think worst case scenario, and it feels like the worst case scenario is you get swept in the first round.
Yeah,
I just can't see them missing the playoffs.
There's just two teams in this division. I say I can't. There's absolutely no way I see them missing the playoffs. It's the Rangers and the Hurricanes. Pittsburgh's close to that, but I could see things going wrong for the Penguins. I barring even like an injury to Shesterkin, okay, like they've got Halak, which isn't too bad, and they're a good enough team in front of him to mitigate that loss for a decent amount of time to still be a good team. So a loss to Panarin, if Lafreniere can step up, if Kakko can step up, a loss to Fox, you've still got Miller, Trouba, Zach Jones. You've got good enough players that a loss, and like barring a loss to all three of your top players, which really never happens for an entire season, then and that's. You can't bet on that. So I think it would be a shock for them not to make the playoffs. Like, it would be a full-on collapse from everybody on that team.
Yeah. Real quick, something I just want to mention that is super fun and super awesome. With their last pick in the 2022 draft, in the 6th round, 191st overall, the New York Rangers drafted a centerman by the name of Zachary Carpa. Everybody old will know what that means, because yes, he is in fact the son of Dave Carpa, who was a early member of the Mighty Ducks teams, and I'm pretty sure is in the top 10 for career penalty minutes with the Anaheim Ducks. And I just thought that was really cool. And then obviously they've got Sikora, who I don't actually think is related to Peter Sikora,
but
they just have the same last name, which is cool.
You just know that the future trade of Zegras becoming a Ranger means Sikora and Carpa are coming back to the Ducks.
I hate you. Why would you fucking say that? You're such a bastard.
Oh, just let's never think about that ever.
Yeah, I don't need to do that. I mean, the other one to say that they it's less of a loss because they only picked him up at the deadline, but he was good for them, was Andrew Kopp. So it is so weird. Like, this team has everything you could want it to have. And yet there is still a world in which things go wrong and this team doesn't make it out of the first round.
Yeah. There's, listen, like, again, Shesterkin can drag you through a first round. Panarin can drag you through a first round, right? So it would take a lot for things to go wrong. But yeah, they are in that category where you could say, like, depending the matchup, there's good enough teams in both the Metro and the Atlantic that if you don't win your division and you don't get a favorable matchup and you're playing, second best team in the Metro, or you're playing a good team that dropped into the wild card, somebody like Pittsburgh drops into the wild card and they just match up well against you in the playoffs. Like, that's that's tough. Whether you have home ice or not. I know MSG is not an easy place to go play, but there's a world where, it just doesn't pan out for them. They don't come out right. They lose the first 2 games at home, and then all of a sudden you're in an uphill battle and you end up losing in the first round. It's like that every year for every team most of the time. Tampa Bay getting swept by Columbus, right? Anybody can lose in the first round, but it would take a lot because, again, I think they have enough guys as superstar talent to drag you through a series at least to kind of get there. So it would take a lot of guys falling off for them to lose in the first round, or just a really unfavorable matchup.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. I mean, again, I'm looking at our cheat sheet, and biggest strength, we have goaltending plus youth/potential talent.
They have the potential to be the best team in the league. I truly believe that if everything goes right for them.
I think that's fair. I honestly, I don't think I would have said that coming into this, but sitting here talking this through with you, looking at where this team is at, you can absolutely see a world in which they win the President's Trophy. And I still don't know that I would take that bet. Again, biggest weakness, finishing talent. One big question: can they get anything out of the kids? And that's the whole thing. It basically just comes down to: are the older guys going to take a step back? Are any of the older guys going to randomly take a step back just because that's what happens as guys get older? There's always, guys who get there a little faster than others as far as the downside. And are they going to be able to compensate for that? Here's an interesting thing. In hindsight, and with the full understanding that this is hindsight, do you still take Lafreniere number 1?
Who went number 2 in that draft? Was it Byfield?
Byfield. And 3 was Stützle.
Yeah, I think you still take, as going into this year, I still think you take Lafreniere number 1. It's really easy to look at what Tim Stützle has done in Ottawa and the year he had last year to be like, okay, he's above them right now, because it was kind of a 3-horse race in a sense where people were like, oh, maybe Tim Stützle can go number 1, maybe Byfield goes number 1. It ultimately was never a question with Lafreniere. I still take Lafreniere number 1, and listen, I think the thing, we say this with a lot of teams, it depends if the depth steps up, or if it depends if these kids really take a step forward. We've been saying that with the Ducks for a long time. The difference with the Rangers is these are high caliber young players. These guys rarely don't pan out and become NHL players when we're talking first overall picks and a second overall pick and Lafreniere and Kakko. The odds are in their favor for them to pan out and be, very good NHL players, if not superstars in this league. And it's just a matter of time. So I think that's where the Rangers differ for me, right? Is there's a better chance that these guys do pan out and do play well this year. Mm-hmm. And they've had a couple years in the league now, and they kind of know what to expect. And they're both going to get thrust up in the lineup now to play top 6 minutes on a regular basis with good players. I would bet on their young guys producing and playing well over a lot of other teams in this league. When you look at Carolina saying, can Netchas and Jarvis step up? I would still put money on Kakko and Lafreniere being guys that I would say, oh yeah, they'll have a good year or better chance than a lot of the other younger players in this league. When we talk Cole Perfetti in Winnipeg and Marco Rossi in Minnesota, guys like that, it's all dependent on if these young guys can step up. I still would put my money with Lafreniere and Kakko just because of how highly thought of and they were going into their draft seasons, and still, they've still looked good. Kakko's underlying numbers are great. Defensively, he's been excellent. It just hasn't got the offense going. And Lafreniere looked really good last year, and they've seemed to have a focus to work on their defensive side of the game. So I think everything's going to come for them at some point. And, it will be a very, very scary team if Lafreniere and Kakko all of a sudden become 40 and 50-point players this year. That is...
Oh, yeah.
That is a tough team to go and play against. And if they continue to also be exceptional two-way players like that into the mix of guys like Zibanejad and Kreider and Trocheck, and then the bottom 6 that they have, they'll immediately, for me, skyrocket to the favorites. They have that potential, I think, a bit more than other teams, where when you're looking at Toronto and you're looking at Tampa and Colorado, the question marks around their teams are not so much can these young guys step up, it's can these new additions, or can they can they handle the losses that they sustained in the offseason, or is the goaltending good enough, or in Tampa's cases, is the depth good enough? Is these guys going to stay healthy? I think the Rangers have the easiest questions to answer, if you want to call it that, with it's just the young guys to step up, and the young guys are highly sought talents in this league.
Yeah, no, I think, for me, I think in hindsight, I wonder if you would rather have Lucas Raymond.
Yeah, I could see it.
But, again, like you said, like Lafreniere, he hasn't necessarily hit the heights people had hoped. So, but he had 19, 20 goals last year. He was all right.
Yeah, he was good enough last year, right? Like, wasn't bad. Didn't live up, I'm sure, to the
second year in the league.
Lofty expectations. Wasn't a major improvement, like 21 points in 56 games the first year, 31 points in 79 games last year, but largely playing kind of third line minutes for most of the time. And this year it seems like he's going to play with Panarin or play with Zibanejad and be handed first power play opportunities, and I think that's where things could really start to click for this kid. I mean, listen, there was a reason why people were putting him in the categories, being one of the best players to potentially come out of the draft for the last few years, because he was just that good at junior level and that dominant for years. So I was not ready to write him off yet, and I was a real big fan of Quentin Byfield heading into that draft, and
I love Quentin Byfield.
And again, we haven't seen anything from Quentin Byfield yet, and I would still put money on him being the best player to come out of that draft. As good as Tim Stützle has been, as good as other players in that draft have been already. Lafreniere still has everything going for him to be a superstar in this league, and that could come as early as this year. I just think he's that good, and he showed signs of that. We've seen some exceptional moments from Lafreniere. He had a couple highlight reel goals last year. Still, again, 19 goals is not bad for a player who was 19 last year. Is 20 heading into this year. Like, he's got plenty of time. Like, we thrust so much expectations on these kids to succeed right off the bat, because we've seen guys enter the league in Matthews and McDavid and just immediately thrust into superstardom right off the bat, where it's almost like if that doesn't happen with first overall picks now, that they're bad. And we saw it with Jack Hughes. And, oh, God, this was a wasted pick. And look what he did last year. He balled out last year, and everybody's like, yep, okay, here we go. Like, he's going to be a superstar this year. Like, that's going to happen. I mean, more like
Scott still has him as the first overall pick in that draft, and that's the draft with Caulfield, Boldy, Zegras, Sider.
Yeah.
Like, and there's I think you still take Jack Hughes. Like, that's how good he is. These other guys are no joke. Like, real no joke. Did you see Cole Caulfield's one-timer in the preseason game yesterday? Fucking savage, bro. That was so nice.
It just takes time. I think that's the thing, right? Is it's not always going to be the first year or even the second year, but there is a better chance than not that these guys are going to figure it out and become great players in this league, because it rarely happens that you get a Yakupov type situation that a guy just doesn't pan out. And I think we're all, you all kind of expect that now.
I think it's fair to say there is still more than likely an opportunity that they become meaningful top of the lineup contributors. I would say I don't know that I would consider it more likely than not that they hit their ceilings, right? Like, because again, again, we all know that the comparisons are unfair in what they kind of do to these kids and put people in positions. But we both trust Cam Robinson a lot. And I remember him with Lafreniere. He was saying he thinks of him in the vein of Jonathan Huberdeau. Yeah. If he becomes Jonathan Huberdeau, that's fucking huge. At this point, I don't know that I would expect that. But you still can't completely discount it.
Nope.
And I think that's the thing that you're saying right now that I think is 100% true is they still have the horses. They just got to get everybody pulling in the same direction. To that extent, which do you think is more likely this year? Gallant wins the Jack Adams or gets fired before the new year?
Wins the Jack Adams.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think
it's the best goalie award, so I get that.
Yeah, pretty much. I just think they have a better chance of being the best team in this entire league than being bad enough for him to get fired by January. I would put, I think it's a better chance there. And I hate that. I was going to make that comparison to Lafreniere to Jonathan Huberdeau. I love that comparison. I think that is what we're talking about, where sometimes, it takes a couple years for some of these guys to get established. Jonathan Huberdeau was a 3rd overall pick. Less than a point per game in his rookie year. Worse in his second year, 28 points in 69 games, and didn't break out into his 3rd year. And the breakout season was 54 points in 79 games. He didn't really become a superstar in this league until 2018-2019 when he put up 92 points. That was his first point per game season in the National Hockey League. And then ever since then, he's been well over a point per game player. Like, sometimes things just take a little bit longer, they click. And I think Lafreniere is a very similar player to Jonathan Huberdeau. And listen, if he can come out and put up 54 points this year for the Rangers, that's a win for them. That's huge. That's a breakout year for him. You don't have to be a point per game player to have a breakout year, So I think we're going to see big things from Lafreniere this year. I have more confidence in him than Kako, but I still think Kako will figure it out.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty much with you, man. I think, this is, I honestly, like, I am higher on this team after this than I thought I would have been going into this year. I think it's hard to say, again, like we've talked about, that they have the high-end talent, and I think you have to have them in the contenders tier across the league. But I was more than prepared for them to kind of be a paper tiger just because the Chris Kreider stuff, like, I just, and again, like, it's so stupid, but they outperformed both of their expected goals numbers, and their expected goals percentage was god awful for a team that put up that many points. But fuck, man, I don't know that I'm not more convinced they finished top 5 in the league in points than I am they finished 3rd in the division. You know what I mean? Like, this is going to be a real fun team to watch this year, Ed. I'm really excited.
Yep, they'll be one of the teams that if we're going to pick a team from that division or from the Eastern Conference to watch, I'll try and watch a few Rangers games because they just have that potential to be a really, really fun team to watch if things go right. They've already got, again, Shesterkin's must-watch TV, Fox is must-watch TV, Panarin's must-watch TV, but Zibanejad is in that conversation. But when you look at the boom or bust potential of guys you've already mentioned in Lafreniere or Kako, then all of a sudden, like, if that happens, they're a team that you have to watch as often as you can. And that's all you hope for from the most exciting teams in the league, right? So they're definitely in that mix.
Yeah, Keandre Miller's starting to figure it out more and more every game, and Jacob Trouba could kill someone in any game. Like, it's perfect. I love it.
So could Ryan Reeves. So, yeah. You're going to get probably a highlight reel goal. Jacob Trouba laying somebody out, and Ryan Reeves cleaning up the mess. That's likely what you're going to get. And Shesterkin just looking excellent. So,
yeah, no shit. All right, man. You got anything else? I think that's about it for the Metropolitan Division preview.
Yeah, and then we're on to the Sabres and the Atlantic, and then
yes, sir.
We're done with our previews and our deep dives, and then we're into the regular season, and well, just before that, doing our Ducks kind of deep dive and Ducks season preview, and going into that right before the season starts. So. We're a couple days away from October now, so expect the Atlantic one to come out fairly soon, within the next week or so, and then the Ducks preview before the home opener. I believe they open at home, right? The Ducks do, I think, or before this.
No, they open in Seattle.
Yeah, before the season opener. Then on October 12th. We'll have our Ducks season preview out before then to make sure we get everything obviously in before the season starts, since it's a season preview. And as we mentioned multiple times, Pat is expected to make his return to the show after almost a year. December, I think, was the last time that he was on the show. So he's expected to be back for that show, and
we should have
Jay said he should be there as well. So that will be a fun one, man. It'll be nice to get everybody back for the new season, previewing the Ducks. It's going to be an exciting year. Preseason games happening right now. They're down, 4-3 to the Sharks, I think?
4-3 headed into the second intermission.
4-3 headed into the second intermission. So, yeah, man, it'll be fun. I'm excited for this year. I mean, I think a lot of people are new additions to the team. Obviously, Trevor Zegras makes this fun on a nightly basis, but a lot of other things to be excited about. Mason McTavish, Olin Zellweger maybe making the team. What can John Gibson do this year? Max Jones is back, so it's going to be fun.
Yeah, man. I'm so excited to see Max Jones this year. Yeah. But at this point, we're just making it longer for no real reason.
Yeah.
Eddie, you got anything
we'll
else
save that
say?
for the other shows. Nope, that's it.
Yeah, no shit.
That's it. Got to keep it under 2 hours here.
Yeah, or we get in trouble. So thank you, everybody. Like Eddie said, the next one will be the Atlantic, which, I mean, might be the best division in hockey. And the Buffalo Sabres are the team we're going to really jump into on that one. So that should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to that one.
All right, guys, take care, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody.